Did anyone see the vote in the House of Representatives or the Senate where everyone lined up? We did a roll call vote, yes or no, that we should declare war in Yemen? Well, last evening, we decided to enact drone strikes in Yemen. So for those of you that may not be aware, Yemen is on the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. It borders Oman and Saudi Arabia. And for the last 8 to 10 years, last decade, there has been this civil war that has been unfolding. Now, how this impacts American national security is quite a stretch. It is quite a stretch how this impacts our national security. We're being invaded, 15,000 people a day on our southern border, and we get drone strikes in Yemen. Now, maybe we could get drones over our southern border. I'm not saying we need drone strikes over the southern border. Well, the cartels should be striked. But can we get drones over our southern border, finding out who is coming across the border, where they're coming from? No. Like all things Washington, D.C., and all things neoliberal, what happens abroad is the priority. What happens domestic is ignored. So we're getting into the latest intervention into now another perpetual quagmire in the Middle East. We launched airstrikes against the Houthis, a radical Islamic military group that controls a large amount of the country of Yemen. Now, let me just press pause. Who are the Houthis? How many of you in the audience have neighbors, friends, family members that have died because of the Houthis? Anybody? The United Kingdom collaborated in these strikes. Overall, more than 60 targets were hit all over western Yemen, using more than 100 missiles. The justification for these strikes is that they are a self-defense in response to repeated Houthi attacks on shipping in the Red Sea area. Along with the strikes, the U.S. has imposed the new waves of sanctions on companies that we claim indirectly financially support the Houthis. For background, Houthis are a tribe in northern Yemen that is associated with the Shiite Islamic religious movement. The Houthis have been fighting a civil war in Yemen for the last 10 years. They control about half the country, and they actually control the country's capital. The Houthis are sponsored by Iran, and they're opposed most strongly by Saudi Arabia, which has been fighting a war in Yemen for years now. It's another less famous of the Middle East's forever wars. The U.S. has supported the Saudi war effort in 2019. Congress voted to cut off that support after Saudis killed Jamal Khashoggi. But Trump vetoed that bill, saying, sorry, you don't get in the way of our diplomacy. And the Saudis are allies, and they're tough. Well, it didn't get any more diplomatic benefits with the Houthis. They're still radically anti-America, anti-Israel, and pro-Hamas. So after the latest war in Gaza broke out, the Houthis started using rockets and drones against ships trying to pass through the Red Sea to the Suez Canal. On November 18th, they captured a cargo vessel called the Galaxy Leader, which they've been exhibiting as a tourist attraction in Yemen. In the short run, the group has vowed to remain defiant despite U.S. strikes, and they've apparently seen an increase in support and recruitment due to enthusiasm over the war in Gaza. So why is the United States doing this? Why is this in our national security interest? Well, as we mentioned, the Houthis have been firing at shipping, and there's a lot of U.S. credibility based on the Navy acting as a security force for international trade. There might be some geopolitics we don't know about. The one idea that I came up with is maybe the Saudis are going to take Gazan refugees, and they called America. They said, we'll go take Gazan refugees if you go bomb some of our enemies in Yemen. However, it's more likely that Biden needs a distraction, that Biden needs some sort of foreign conflict to take the eyes away from his domestic failures. The most likely scenario is we get nothing for this. Saudi Arabia isn't even helping us with the airstrikes, and they're the ones who are supposed to hate the Houthis. Overall, this is another example of the world flying into pieces under the Biden regime. Even if the specific strikes were justified, they happen in the context of us getting one international crisis after another under Joe Biden, who is a failure as a president here domestically. And so taking a step back, how does Joe Biden have the power to do this? Well, technically, there is the War Powers Act, which allows you to do strikes and military operations in a very targeted manner. But you look at what's happened in Ukraine, what's happening in Israel, what's happening in the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. War is breaking out at every possible vector across the world. We have conflicts in Ukraine, Hamas, Hezbollah, Yemen, Iranian proxies in Iraq, and not to mention the most important, we are being illegally invaded every single day. Our cities have become war zones. Our schools are being converted into migrant illegal shelters in New York City. What is the justification for this? From allegedly his hospital bed, Lloyd Austin approved these airstrikes. How is this in the best interest of American national security? And the answer is, it isn't. It helps the war profiteers. It helps the warmongers, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman. They all get wealthier because of this. In addition, Lady Graham is celebrating. Lady Graham is going on television. Could we get the Lady Graham tweet up? He is excited. Bomb, 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 Iran. Lady Graham is singing from the high heavens that we might finally have a war in every hemisphere. His dream of having a war in every possible continent. I'm very supportive of the Biden administration's decision to strike Houthi rebels who have been harassing international shipping and trying to attack Israeli and American interests. It's long past time to let Iran know we'll hold them accountable for their actions or their proxies, in this case, the Houthi rebels. The only language radical Islamic groups understand is force. I hope the Biden administration understands that the deterrence policy has completely failed. They must continue using military force in the face of aggression from Iran and their proxies. 100 years ago, politicians promised a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. Now, politicians promise troops in every country and a war on every continent. Does this make you wealthier? And it should make you so angry that the American government is willing to use force against Houthi rebels that have not impacted your communities, that have not even remotely threatened your way of life. And yet we can't secure our own border. It's perfectly acceptable to do airstrikes on the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. In fact, I know we do airstrikes against the cartels. The fentanyl coming into the country. The new sex slaves that are being trafficked into North America. Wouldn't that justify a military response? But of course not. The American national security regime does not care if the homeland is invaded. In fact, they're supportive of the Great Replacement. They're supportive of the invasion. But the big concern is that some rebel group is going after sea lanes in the Middle East. Even the lowest Mexican cartels is more worthy of our attention than the worst terror group in Yemen or Syria. If you want to increase the likelihood of war, this is what you do. It's enough to provoke the rebels to increase their recruitment. They say they're going to respond. They're going to go after Western forces. Did Congress vote on this? Why is Joe Biden allowed to do this? And why is it in our national security interest while we are currently being invaded?